All right, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Walsh. If we haven't met, former classroom teacher, currently working in ed tech with MathSpace. Oh, there we go, all good. I am so excited for this event to bring these three panelists to you so that you can hear their stories, learn from them, fellow former teachers who can really empathize with the journey that many of you are on. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping kind of items. So the structure of this event is Q&A. We had over 200 questions submit ahead of time for our panelists, which is incredible. And so I have done my best to try to bucket those questions. If we don't get to your question today, then there will be follow-up events where we can deep dive into some of the nitty-gritty. So don't worry if we don't cover all of the questions today. But that being said, there will be a recording of this event shared with you so that if there's any insights that you don't retain or write down during the event, you can always watch it at your own speed. Another piece that I put it in the agenda because I thought I might forget, a moment to acknowledge your journey. So just want to recognize that there are people on this call from all walks of life, not just geographically or personally, but in terms of your career journey and your experience with our education system. And so just want to be sensitive to the fact that, some of you might be feeling discouraged, confused. Others of you might just be getting started, considering a pivot from the classroom. Some of you might have been on this journey for a long time now and you're not sure what's next. So that being said, that's okay. And thank you for being here. And just in no way want to invalidate that, all of us have very unique paths in this career search. And thank you for your impact in education, whether it's inside the classroom or outside. All right. Introduction to the panelists. So in just a moment, I'm going to pull my microphone and pass it over to the panelists, and they will tell us their Teacher2Tech story. So many of you have asked for interview prep support, and this is something that I want you to think about how these stories that you're hearing, how your story might actually be what sets you apart when you're in front of a future employer. So that being said, I'll quickly share some highlights from my Teacher2Tech story. I did begin my educational journey in the public school system in California, in Sacramento. After witnessing some of the inequity, I got curious about whether all schools and school districts were like mine. And so I set off to learn more about schools across the country and around the world. What I like to say is that I was, I'd set certain goals for myself to work at a university, be part of a teacher prep program. I thought that the institutions were part of the solution when it comes to educational change. And so, like many of you, I wrote, countless cover letters, editing, tweaking, practicing. I interviewed a lot, was accepted to some programs, but then financially things didn't pan out. And so I found myself, that was about a 5-year period while I was teaching in the classroom as well. I taught 5th, 6th grade, then I taught middle school, 7, 8. And anyways, I ended up moving to Australia, not for the graduate studies fellowship that I thought I would be moving there for, but I chose to begin substitute teaching and learn about their education system on the ground. And so I could speak a lot to that. We'll get into it another time, but my health had been deteriorating when I was in my full-time role in California, and it wasn't sustainable. I felt like I needed to make a change, but I wasn't sure what. And I felt a lot of emotional turmoil in terms of leaving my school community. So, in hindsight, being in another country while teaching, it alleviated some of that or shifted my perspective in some ways. And that's when I actually made the pivot to tech. So, applied for a lot of different roles, thought it would be professional development or social emotional learning related. And then fast forward again, a lot of closed doors. A couple months later, a friend said, "Hey, don't you have a mathematics background?" And I said, "Oh yeah, but that's not my passion. I had this list of other things that were the criteria." And the friend said, "Well, maybe you should keep your options open. What if there's an opportunity to do all those things in the context of math education?" That afternoon, I saw a job listing with MathSpace, my current employer, and applied and met the team, and the rest is history. So 2 years later, here we are hosting this event so that you can hear stories from others. I'm going to pause there and introduce, let's see, who'd like to go first? I see we have Stella, Tori, and Angelica on the call today. Would one of you like to raise your hand? We didn't come up with an order. This event is meant to feel natural and organic for you, so here we are. Yeah, Tori? All right, awesome. Tell us your Teacher2Tech story. Take it away.
So first of all, I was blown away by all the participation in the chat. I feel like it's really hard as educators to talk about ourselves. So seeing some of the stuff that you said about yourself was really touching, because we don't always give ourselves that pat on the back. And I was the same way. I had pretty much grown up all my life. I'm from Hampton, Virginia, and I had always grown up knowing I wanted to be a teacher. So I had gone to school. I got my degree in elementary education with a concentration in middle school math. And I graduated and I was like, okay, like it's time to do it. Like, this is what I've wanted since I was like 6. So I landed my first job in Chesapeake, Virginia. I taught Math 8 and Algebra 1 to 8th graders, which everyone shudders when they hear not only was it middle school, but it was also math. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, you are like a twisted person. I'm like, no, we had a lot of fun. So I went through that whole experience, and I really truly loved my school community. I really had such an amazing team. I had an amazing grade level team. So like my community was quite strong. The kiddos were great. But as time went on, it was probably into year 3, I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I can sustain this type of job for myself. We all know as educators, it's extremely demanding, not just physically of our bodies, but mostly I feel it was mentally and emotionally demanding. Because you're not only just trying to help one kid learn math and try to be there for all their basic needs and wants, but you're there for 20 plus kids. Or for me, since I'm a middle school educator, I would have over 100 kids on my roster, each with different needs, different wants, and different levels like of learning. So as educators, we have such a huge, important job. And unfortunately, kind of when COVID hit, our whole educational system was in a spiral, and things just got very, very crazy. And I just really struggled with trying to, pour from an empty cup is honestly what was happening. I, would work myself into just tizzies all the time, because sometimes it's hard as educators to know when to say when, because you do want to give your best all of the time because you care for your kiddos. So I pretty much went into this past year, starting the school year, and everything just felt different to me, because they were like, okay, well, COVID seems to be gone, so we're just normal, but something just didn't feel right to me anymore. And that's kind of when I knew that I think my time was up in the classroom. So I ended up resigning in October, and it was really, really emotionally hard for me. I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of guilt. But as time has gone on, I realized that I finally put myself first, which was never a thing I considered in the 5 years prior. And I honestly, to this day, do not regret it. So when I got into this opportunity of finding a new job, I really started from the bottom. I didn't have a LinkedIn. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I'm literally starting from the ground up. So my husband helped me get on LinkedIn. I made myself LinkedIn profile. I tried to make it look as snazzy as possible. And I just pretty much started learning. I would just go through and look up, I would do like job hunts of certain stuff. I started learning about all the different companies that are out there that no one tells you about in the ed tech space. Because during my time as a teacher, I did a lot of leadership roles where I would work with like my technology integration specialist. I would lead professional developments. I would do trainings for the city. I wrote curriculum. So I was like, I think I'm going to look at jobs that are kind of based around that. And I started looking at a lot of stuff, started to look awesome. And kind of like Katie, I thought at first, I think I want to go into like maybe higher ed and work in a college. Then I was like, oh, I don't know about that. I had put out applications, nothing was really happening. And so I looked back at my resume again, and I was like, Tori, you really loved working with teachers. You really loved developing the instructional capacity of others. Why don't we try to give that a shot? And I was sending out, my resumes and all that kind of stuff. I still wasn't hearing back. And the biggest thing that helped me was attending. I don't know if you guys know about James Patterson. He is a huge ed tech enthusiast on LinkedIn. I had learned about him during my search, and he was hosting a well, this sounds interesting. I can learn about the companies that are going to be there. I can hop in and maybe talk to some of the hiring managers. So one day when I was actually at my part-time job, I went into the other room, closed the door, and I attended that virtual job fair. And I truly believe because of that, that event, I was able to network. And I truly believe that's how I landed my current job. I was able to pretty much meet with two main companies that day. I actually met with Katie that day for Math Space because I knew I wanted to do something with math because that's my background. I knew I wanted to do something with professional development of some sort, possibly sales. So I met with Katie from Math Space, and then I met with Karen, who is part of Mind Research Institute. And I was able to just put my face out there, put my name out there, kind of share what, brings me joy, what my passion was. And I saw that Mind Research was the one that really spoke to me. Their mission is really centered around, students being real problem solvers, and it had the professional development piece that I liked. So I applied for an education success consultant, which pretty much works with teachers around the United States to train them on the program and build their confidence to be better teachers in the classroom using this program. And within a week of doing that, I ended up getting the phone interview and then the job interview face-to-face, and I was hired. And at first I was like, yay. Now, don't be disappointed in yourself if you decide to go with a part-time role. I actually really love that I'm diving into ed tech, but it's not intense like a full-time position. I've really enjoyed getting to learn stuff, and I'm excited to kind of see where my life is headed in ed tech. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'll pass it off to Stella. You want to go, Stella?
Thanks, Tori.
Yeah.
All
That's
right,
so
Stella.
neat. I was gonna say we were both at the same job fair, girl. I attended maybe like 3 or 4 of those. So hi everyone, I am Stella Canna. I was a special education teacher out in the Chicagoland suburbs for 10 years, middle school as well. I taught reading, writing, math, pushed into general ed, had self-contained, and what kind of started to really weigh heavy on me is like every single one of the kiddo stories, because I'm just like, I got to know everything about everyone. And so as the years continued, I feel like the just landscape of the world was creating such a huge like trauma space for these kiddos, their parents, and the pandemic, of course, didn't help. And so I was dealing with really intense cases of students who had self-harm, self-refusal. I had a student whose dad was deported, like just very intense stories. And so it's like, whoa, I didn't sign up to be a psychologist or social worker, yet I had to manage the students because they were on my caseload. Definitely working with a variety of general education teachers, good, bad, ugly, seen it all. And so, yeah, I just started to think, how is it possible that these people stay in this role for 20 more years and they're just, okay with it. I was someone who constantly went to different workshops. I got my master's as a reading specialist. I always tried to infuse things within the classroom. And as the years progressed, I was more like limited on what I could do. My creativity bubble burst. It was, can't do this. You have to start doing this. And that really didn't jive with me just because, as we know what our students need. And it's not the scripted curriculum they're giving us. It's not the software that they're making us, have them use. And so that's really what was driving at me, that my moral compass was really not aligning to what was happening in education. So I was like, do I go to another school? No. Education in the US is the same thing everywhere. So that's when I was like, I need to leave. But what do? I thought I can honestly just be a instructional designer or trainer. No offense to any of those roles, just not what I was interested in. And then I took an inventory of what did I like, and it was, meeting with people, building those relationships, helping them solve goals. That's what I did as a special education teacher, monitored goals. I love seeing the progression of where they were and then where did they end up. And so I joined something called Classroom to Boardroom. Anyone can join it. It is, a course where you have to pay for it by Carrie Conover. I did that in January of 2021, up until I believe September. And so what I learned from that course are the vast majority of paths I can take. And, was it sales? Was it curriculum writing? Was it customer success? Was a content writing program manager. And then when I was reading through customer success items, I was like, this is me to a T. So I would say a good tip is just literally looking on job descriptions and seeing, are these things something I want to do each and every day? I really dove into LinkedIn in June of 2021. It literally was my full-time job. I didn't go on any vacations. I just sat on LinkedIn every day, all day. The month of June, I simply studied it. I used LinkedIn like Google, typed in things, found people, looked at hashtags. So I was really focused on customer success, meeting with customer success managers. I landed on a tech role, contract role that lasted a month. And then it took me about 2 more months to find a different role. And so I would say if you are financially able to take a contract role, because it's not glorious, it's not anything close to sometimes what you're making, but I made that sacrifice and I was saving so that I could make that pivot. And then I continued to search for roles. And then, I found something in March of this year. And so for me, it took 8 months. Something to think of is like whatever your timeline is, it's going to get shot out the water. I had this goal, 2022, I'm going to start with a new job. That didn't happen. And so like even putting all these like parameters on yourself really weighs a ton. And when January hit, I was just like, forget it. I'm just seeing what happens. So I really dove into my contract role and just continued to network with people on LinkedIn. And that's how I found my role. It was someone's comment on LinkedIn. He was a hiring manager. So went straight to him, messaged him, hey, we're in the same community. I see this opening. And that's where it led me to my current role as a customer success manager. So shoot your shot.
Amazing. Thanks, Stella. And over to you.
Hi, everybody. So Teacher2Tech story. This is a really good interview question. I remember when I was interviewing with MathSpace, which is where I work now with Katie, this was one of the questions I received. Tell us how you got here. What brought you to our company? And I have to admit that the first time I went around with this question, I was off completely on random stories. And luckily, my now manager gave me another chance. And she said, okay, tell me what brought you here. How did you go from teacher into tech? So this is a really good thing to think about when you're interviewing, what sort of themes you see in your own career and how it brings you to whatever job you're interviewing with. So when I think about my own career, I taught for a grand total of 7.5 years. And so I taught grades 8 through 11 math. So anywhere from algebra 2, math 8, like Tori. And so thinking about all of the roles that I've had, every single year that I've been teaching, I noticed that I've always taken whatever course assignment I've had and tried to, just like other teachers, enhance whatever assignment it is for my students. So take the curriculum, improve it for my students, and find ways to integrate different technologies or to get into writing curriculum. So the last 3 years that I've been teaching, I've actually been doing curriculum writing. I had been doing curriculum writing with my own district. And that was something that I realized that not every teacher is interested in doing. And I only realized that after going to a few meetings and noticing that not many people were interested in showing up and writing curriculum. So the theme for me across my years of teaching was that I was really interested in always enhancing my curriculum each year. And that led me to joining certain committees within my district and taking on roles that would lead me to focusing myself in curriculum writing. So at this point, I'm a curriculum specialist. And so I can kind of talk about my journey from, well, I'm noticing a theme every year, and this is something that it's just led me here. So definitely a good interview question to not kind of think about all the other things, but focus on how did I get here and what's the theme?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ange. And yeah, absolutely echo that sentiment that you'll see patterns across your career journey or your personal life in terms of what lights you up, what you want to spend the most time on, things that drain you. And so really throughout this journey, the more specific you can get personally, even if you just make a list, right? Parts of my role that I love, parts that exhaust me. And then take the parts that you love and, like Stella said, go read through job descriptions and start seeing the patterns of the kind of the buckets of roles that fit you or that you might enjoy. I'll also be sharing a resource after this event that shares a bit more tips and ideas around that. So first question for all of you, what did you find most challenging about your transition from teacher to tech? And this can be a quick, short answer. It doesn't have to be long, but thought it would be great for the team to hear. Yeah, Ange, go ahead.
I think that the most challenging part about transitioning from teacher to tech is not or wondering if I'm going to be supported by my coworkers. And that was maybe the most embarrassing feeling. And so at the end of the day, after going through the whole process of deciding to resign and sharing with my coworkers, I found a lot of support that I wasn't expecting. So the biggest challenge was worrying about what everybody else thought once I was going to leave, but finding a lot of support.
Yeah, such a good point. Thanks, Ange. Would anyone else like to weigh in on this one?
I'd say real quick, just the lack of feedback. I don't know where you all applied, but where I applied, I was getting nothing. Even after calls with people, 3-4 round interviews, you just get a generic email response. And it's like, as teachers, we're all like, what should we do to, upskill and learn? And so really being ghosted in that way was really tough. But then what I learned is like, is that a company I want to work at when someone's not able to respond to an email? That took a long time for me to say no, even though it was one of my top 5 companies. How they treat you in the interview process is really revealing as to how they are as a company. So say that to yourself over and over and over again, and it's okay. It wasn't meant to be, and your place you'll find your spot.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. And one comment on that note, because I have since been on the hiring side of an ed tech company. As you all know, the industry is growing rapidly right now, and there is a large number of candidates applying to different roles, especially with this remote hybrid culture of work. You know, roles aren't perhaps limited to a region, but nationally, internationally. And so just to echo what Stella said, the less personal you can make that process, right? Sometimes companies simply don't have systems in place, especially if you are applying to startups, which I know many of you are. So rather than perhaps compete with some of the really big companies, you might be looking at smaller startups to get your foot in, which I think is wonderful. That's the path I took, but it does mean that certain things like the hiring process might feel a little touch and go. It's not a reflection of you. It has nothing to do with your worth, your value. It's simply part of the process. And so if that means you move on to another opportunity, that's okay. Tori, did you have something to share? Should we go to the next question? Awesome. So on that note, how did you connect with your current company? I think that was mentioned a little bit already, Tori, Stella. And did you share how you found MathSpace? Because you were actually based in the US and found out about a company in Australia that's newer to the US school system. So how did you connect with MathSpace?
I connected with MathSpace through LinkedIn, and embarrassingly, in my first interview, I asked them if they had a headquarters in DC, which is where the location was, and they said, nope, we're in Australia only. So LinkedIn it was.
There you go. And on that note, right, doing your research in terms of where the headquarters is, I say that because I had a few mishaps as well, where I thought, oh, I probably could have found that information somewhere. But you will see that some companies have PO boxes in different cities if they are international, sometimes for hiring purposes, taxes, etc. All right, next question. What do you wish you knew during the application and interview process? Good question. Who'd like to jump in? What do you wish you knew? Hindsight 2020.
I can go.
Yeah, Stella?
I would say that what you're currently doing can be transferred into what they're asking for. It just takes a lot of self-reflection. So instead of beating yourself, you know, I've done this, you can keep saying that over and over. They want to see a story. They want to see percentages. They want to see how you made something grow. It's a big shift in thinking about money and revenue, because we didn't have to do that as teachers. Could care less if, you know, they gave us any money. That's completely different in corporate. It's all about the money. If we're not making money, no one has a job. So I think really shifting that and thinking of, you know, how can I take my experience and create this story, a succinct story in like 2 minutes or less, and really highlighting how I took something from 50% to 80% or 90%. What growth did I hit? So really using numbers and percentages when you're sharing your answers.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. Quantifying some of those things, right? Instead of led professional development for district, let us know that there happened to be 50 schools that were part of that professional development. It creates a more specific story. Tori, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I love what you said, Stella, because I feel like I was able to tell my story a little bit more when I had gone to Jeff Patterson's virtual job fair, because it's so hard when, like what Katie was saying, like there is just such a high volume of applicants. But if I had known about that job fair earlier in my process, I could have put my face out there a little earlier, and I could have been able to connect with others, because that human connection is so important. And I was just so thankful that I landed on that post that one day. And I was like, I really feel like this is going to set me apart from others, because I'm taking the time to put myself out there at this virtual job fair, and they're able to put a face to the name. And I remember when I had gotten the job, I had posted it on LinkedIn, and I was so excited. And Karen from Mind Research had commented, and she was like, I just knew you were so passionate from the time I met you. And that's really, why we want you here. And that just made such a difference to me, knowing that she did recognize me and that my efforts to do something like that was powerful. So I just encourage you, like, take advantage of those opportunities during your time, applying and stuff like that. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. And I want to highlight one part of what you said, which is your passion resonated with your new employer. And I think some of you highlighted in the form registration that there's a lot of contradictory advice out there, right? We just suggested that you really quantify your resume, but then that it might be your passion that, sets you apart. And so, just keep in mind that it's possible for all of these things to coexist, and that what sets you apart for one company might not be the same thing that another company is looking for, and that's okay. So like the panelists have mentioned, that self-reflection and introspection and knowing yourself and showing up as yourself is going to be the quickest way or most efficient way to connect with those companies that that you would be most aligned with in the long run. Ange, anything you wish that you knew in the process?
I think that I would touch on knowing that there are companies that are looking for former teachers and desire and want that. And there are companies that are possibly not interested in hearing, I'm at the end of my rope. So being careful in your interviews to focus on the really positive and great things about you and why you're transitioning, and just knowing if companies are seeking any former teachers, or if they're wondering, hey, why is it that you're wanting to leave education, and questioning you on that. So that's something to be wary of.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of solutions-oriented communication is important. All right, next question. This one came through a lot on Slido and the registration form. Can you please describe an average day in your current role? So you can be as detailed or high level as you'd like, but let us know, what does this actually look like? Schedule, meetings, time collaborating, internal, external versus working on your own. Let's hear it. Tori, go ahead.
All right. Well, since mine is more of a part-time role, obviously my cap each week is 29 hours or less. And pretty much what I get to do is I'm able to sign myself up to do professional learning. So those are those trainings where I can either do them virtually if they offer on-site trainings. Like right now I'm in my hotel room. I'm doing some professional learnings here in Fairfax, Virginia. So I just met with kindergarten kids and second grade kids today. So it just depends on availability. It's going to start picking up more as we go into the summer, because right now it's testing season, which I know we're all familiar with. So things are kind of in a lull right now, but it's going to really pick up. So I think this summer, I'm going to be pretty busy delivering professional development. In the meantime, to kind of make sure I can stack some more hours, I've actually been working with the customer success team with Mind Research and doing call campaigns. So I've been able to kind of use my skills of connecting with people over the phone. And so I've been calling different school districts, asking if they're renewing. I'm using Salesforce, which is a huge client platform. And so I've been learning some other stuff, even though it's not strictly what my job description tells me. So I'm pretty much like the yes man. I'm like, if they have anything available for me to do, I'm gonna do it. I'm your girl. Because I just want to be able to learn and take those experiences with me to whatever role is next in my future, because you just never know. And that's kind of why I love my part-time role. I'm able to do some of this stuff because I have the time, I have the availability and the opportunity. So that's kind of just what I do.
Absolutely. And yeah, things like phone calls that might not sound glamorous, when it's to a school district that you're passionate about helping, it suddenly takes on a whole new tone. And then Tori gets to move on in her career saying she supported customer success and sales teams. So it's interesting to start seeing that overlap or intersection. And Stella, would you like to share a bit about your role? Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Ange.
can share for just a day in my role because I am a curriculum specialist and our project right now is on writing textbooks. We spend a lot of time by ourselves. So most of my day is spent working on lessons, working on worksheets and things like that. And there are days where I have a few meetings and there are days where I don't. So it's very independent. I have to just get my work done on my own. So most of my day is by myself.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying after something. So I'm a client success manager, customer success, same thing. I actually recently started, so I had 6 weeks of training, which is like never heard of in education. So I really enjoyed that we had the opportunity to, similar things, watch videos, but then we would jump on Zooms with the training team, and then they would do more like application based, share your screen, show me how you do this, act like their clients. And then this past week, 2 weeks ago, I started receiving clients. So I have a few accounts and, it just kind of looks a little different, right? There's some clients just like students, they don't need you, they got it. And you're like, cool. You say, hi, I'm Stella. Let me know what you need. And you kind of just monitor them through, Salesforce. We use something called Churn Zero, very similar to like, Power School, Schoology, how you're making sure that students are turning in their work, the same thing. You got to double check that these adults are doing what they said they were going to do. And then, sometimes it's jumping on calls. I had 2 today with clients, so it's called a kickoff call. It's not really led by me. It's led by, we have an onboarding team where they kind of take them through the entire platform. And then I kind of jump in 4 weeks after and I'm like, hey, you're done with onboarding. Supposedly they know what they're doing, which we know they don't. And so they're going to start asking me questions. We set up more trainings. And so it's very similar if you've ever, for all the special education teachers, it's very similar to having a caseload and maintaining. There's people that are going to take more of your attention, and there's going to be people that, will never respond to your email. So it's very similar things like that, doing different types of outreach. We have a weekly meeting as a team. I have a one-on-one meeting with my manager, and then I've gotten involved in committees just because I'm just like, I can't do the whole sit by myself. We have teams chats, and so I'm always like, hey, how's it going? Sending people gifts. So I'm so much like a people person. So yeah, if I see my schedule has no meetings, like I'll just like find someone in the company. I'm like, hey, you want to chat for 15 minutes? So feel free to like do that because yeah, I can't sit by myself all day.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Stella. And to contrast what Anne shared about working predominantly, autonomously in the zone, concentration, curriculum, versus with a lot of different people and platforms, I think that's an important piece for each individual, person to kind of reflect on. And if you're like me, I thought, well, I don't know, I like both. Sometimes I like deep concentration and sometimes I need people. And so there is a way to ask companies about their culture, about their meeting frequency, about their collaboration. I found that as a former teacher, I love cross-functional collaboration, meaning that people from all different squads are working together on something. And I know some of you asked questions about project management, where then maybe you would have touch points across a company. So there is a lot of variability there, but it's something to definitely consider on this search, because not all roles have the same day-to-day norms. Looking at the time, I'm going to go ahead and click into the Slido questions. so that, let's see, are you able to see the blue screen with all of the upvoted questions? Awesome, thanks. So we'll go through these and spend about 10 minutes answering as many as we can. We'll kind of popcorn through. So the first, there are so many teachers that are transitioning right now. How do we stand out? Anyone like to take this one?
I can start. I would say like being you, hustling and having an initiative. I did not wait for nobody to come out to me and say, hey, Stella, you want a job? Every single day. I know some people are full-time instructors. So I'm not saying, ditch your job to do this, but it does take time and energy. So whether that's, I'm going to make 2 connections each day this week, I will send one person a personalized message. Like, people hire people they know. So for me, I stopped like applying like crazy. That's one strategy. I started networking and devoting my time to really finding those people that can hire me. So being very intentional with who you're connecting with on LinkedIn. Teacher community is lovely, but none of us can hire you. So you need to really connect with people that can hire you.
Yeah, Stella, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's going to be part of the first May workshop, is this idea that LinkedIn is a tool and it's amazing to build community and feel supported by transitioning teachers. And we want to balance that with intentional networking with people outside of the teacher community, right? And so rather than seek your community support or feel like you're in an echo chamber of teachers who are having a hard time getting hired, you can reframe and think of LinkedIn as, wait a minute, I can send a direct message to a CEO if I want to. Not that you need to, but you can easily connect with superintendents that, in your future role with sales might help you to have some more connections in the decision-making side of education. And so I think there can be some intentionality there, that there's no hard, fast rule. Some of you asked if you were doing it right or wrong, getting confused by all the back and forth, but just be mindful of the types of posts that you're interacting with and whether or not those connections are going to get you closer to your ultimate goal, which is to transition to a new job. So, Ange, anything else to stand out? Okay. Yeah, I think being your most authentic self, it sounds cliche, but it's good. That's why it's so widely talked about. Biggest resume mistakes.
I can share that my sister-in-law is a recruiter, and so I luckily utilized her as a resource as far as looking at my resume, helping me with practicing with interviewing. And I'm going to admit, I feel like I'm admitting a lot of mistakes that I've made along this interview process, but I did have a pretty resume that I made on Canva. And although it did help me get to the job that I have now, one of her suggestions was utilizing a form or a file type that I think it's something like applicant tracking systems would be able to read easily when I apply for jobs. So I do think that there's something to be said about using the right format for sure.
Yeah, I just spoke with a recruiter talking about ATS, application tracking systems, and the reality is that there are a lot of pre-screening technologies that are used with algorithms to screen applicants, especially at larger companies. So I know LinkedIn has a free feature where you can build a resume from your profile. And this is something I used to do just to get the keywords correct when I was starting out. You can type in the role that you're applying to. It'll help with some of that language. And that idea of tailoring your resume, it doesn't have to be a lot of time and energy, but just some of the, those key skills that you might highlight, put them first if they correspond with the role that you're submitting it for. Change the order depending on the type of role, would be my kind of high level first thoughts there. Anything else to add? And the biggest one, make sure your name is in the save bar. So many recruiters and hiring managers explain that they get hundreds of resumes and it'll just say resume or resume with the year. Make sure your full name is there. The association is. All right, we'll move on to the next one. It seems we're all transitioning to the same roles, instructional design and project management. So we're flooding these job markets. Does it make sense to switch to other roles? Did any of you consider this in your journey?
I guess what I would say is, sorry, Tori, don't limit yourself to the industry. So when I first started, everyone's like, go to ed tech, go to ed tech. Okay, that's one industry. There's so many others. And, you know, there's MarTech, which I'm in now, marketing, health tech, fintech, like any industry you like, social emotional tech. I don't know what that's, you know, acronym for. So I guess like maybe don't pigeonhole yourself in ed tech. But again, who knows? If we had the right answer, we'd all be employed, but.
And with that, it's okay if your resume doesn't say you have the exact qualifications or credentials for the role you're applying to. Yes, upskilling is great, but that being said, as Stella said, don't limit yourself just because there's a few points that you don't clearly meet. That's to be expected. Go ahead, Tori.
I was pretty much going to say along the same line as Stella, like, you know, I really truly did like look at my resume, where my resume has like my work experience and then my leadership roles. And I really looked at like, what is it outside of classroom teaching that, you know, sparked joy? And I knew that it was, like I said, working with teachers, mentoring. So although it may be saturated right now, I really feel like, you know yourself the best. And I don't feel like you should compromise knowing that this is the type of work I want to do to fulfill my career and, you know, my joys and, you know, working with others. So I really feel like we've been saying like the theme of being true to yourself is really important. And I loved what you said, Stella, about how there is so much out there that I had no clue about, because they always say like, oh, you got your teaching degree, you're going to go right into teaching. Like, you know, there is just so much out there that you don't know. And that's where you get to educate yourself. That's the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah, thanks, Tori. And on that note, even just in the last, I feel like 2 years since I was applying to now, this idea that we're not sure if teachers have transferable skills doesn't exist. Like the number of teachers that have stepped into roles and you know, across industries, like we've mentioned, is much higher now, I think, through the pandemic, largely. And so remove that mindset that you have to prove yourself or justify, or that you're not enough, or you're just a teacher, all those narratives that can float around sometimes, because learning and development teams across industries, I have a friend who's in medical sales, and he said, Katie, do you know any teachers who could help build out the learning modules for our international sales team? He said, they've asked me to do it and I don't know how people learn. And this is like a mega, like big company. And I just thought, wow, if your company is open to hiring a teacher, I'm encouraged, you know? So as Stella, Tori said, don't pigeonhole yourself. Anything's possible. All right, next question. Which skills as a teacher were the most pivotal to highlight on your resume or cover letter? Or what do you look for in possible employers that make you interested? Either two, that'll wrap it up for us today. We have about 5 more minutes.
I will speak to what you would add to your resume or cover letter that would highlight, that you could highlight. I think that you should focus on things that you've been able to accomplish. So I know Stella mentioned like percentages. Think about like data and ways that you've helped make improvements with student achievement. I think if you can highlight some of those things that you've done in your career in specific roles, or highlight things that you've contributed to, being able to use data, that is going to be big.
Yeah, and you can align that or tailor that to the company's mission that you might be applying to. So for example, if it's a content area, science, math, writing, assessment and they have particular objectives or values that they want to support students with, gives those specific examples of how you've helped students with that. Because at its core, right, we're in ed tech specifically, we're thinking about student learning and educators. In other industries, you're likely thinking about people, management, growth, right? All of these things that are quite transferable. You'll start seeing the parallels the more you own your skill sets there. Anything else to add? What do you look for in possible employers that makes you interested in working for them? Stella, I saw you nodding.
Yeah, I would say I wrote like a list down of things that were like non-negotiable. So I was like, okay, I need a work-life balance. I need a place where I can grow and develop, that I'm not kind of stagnant as I was in education. And then one that I really kind of agree with their platform and mission and what's going on there. And so then I created questions that would vet companies to make sure. So it wasn't like, oh, how's the work-life balance? I said things like, if a manager were to email you after hours, what's the expectation of you responding that evening? Or is it okay to respond the following morning when you sign in? So really detailed questions, because when I close my laptop and it's done. That's what I wanted in a role. I didn't want this around the clock thing. The trigger words for me were, we're building the plane as we fly it. No, I don't want that. You're going to wear a lot of hats. No, I don't want that. So I really chose companies that were very organized, and that's what I wanted. Other people have a different mindset. So really think of your like non-negotiables and then create questions that you can ask people that work there or the recruiter or whatever. And then when you feel like it's a red flag, then just like walk away. It's okay. Hey, thank you so much. This isn't for me.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stella. And that's where only you can answer those questions, right? What is most important to you? I just saw this question down below about changing departments after you start in one role, if you might want to move to another. So it's that example of, if you want to wear a lot of hats and fly, build the plane as you go, join a startup, get your foot in every room that there is. If that's not your style and you want consistency, structure, healthy, clear boundaries that are determined by the company, then you might look for a more established company. So this is where that research and just talking to people can shed a lot of insight. All right, Tori and Stella, how about final words of encouragement for those in attendance?
SAS is not rocket science. If you could teach, you could do SAS. You got this. And we will smoke them with our emotional intelligence, active listening skills, and relationship building. They don't got it.
And
I just make sure you have a community of people, whether it's your current coworkers or people who you can find support with. Find support, get that support, and get a community.
absolutely. Tori?
I don't know if any of you guys like Love Island, but I watched season 2 and Corey was my favorite person on there. And he had this line of saying, take the risk or lose the chance. And I really feel like that is something that's very true with teachers. Sometimes it is scary. Sometimes it is a daunting idea to step away from the classroom because we have ingrained in our mind that all we can do is teach. But that really is truly not the case. We all have really amazing gifts that can be applied in other capacities. And I just want to encourage you that although it feels like it's taking forever, there is something out there for you. Don't be afraid to take contract roles, part-time roles, full-time roles. Just be able to really dive in whatever way that looks like for you. And we're all just really proud of you all for showing up today and just taking another step forward in your new career journey.
Yes, amazing. I'll just echo those sentiments. And please don't hesitate to connect with all of us. Reach out to me with specific follow-up questions. We do have I've created a Facebook group that's called the Teacher2Tech Hub. I'll send you the details in a follow-up email with this recording. That's where I would love to dive into the nitty-gritty. Perhaps the questions you're not asking on LinkedIn publicly, you could ask there. There are a lot of existing communities, and I have some resources that I'll be sending your way with advice from fellow teacher career coaches. If you're not already connected to them, there's a wealth of information out there, and we are cheering you on. So thank you so much, everyone. This was really fun, and look forward to seeing you all again. All right, have a great evening. Thanks for being here. And
Thank you, Katie, for doing this.
yeah, it was so fun.
Yes,
Hope
thank
it was
you.
helpful. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see, I will stop the recording.